Good morning to you all. Very happy to be here and to moderate this panel, which is named, because it changed, I have to redo that, clothes that don't make us sick, solutions to the problem of plastics. I would like to introduce you four panelists. Let's start with Barbro Melgert. Can you tell a little bit more about yourself?
Yes, I'm Barbro Melgert. I'm a respiratory immunologist and I study exposures to the lungs, including the plastics from our clothes.
Patrick.
Hi. This is very weird. This is like being at a terrible silent disco because I can't even hear you guys. My name's Patrick Grant. 35 years ago, I did a degree in material science. I studied a bit of polymer science. It felt like nothing changed in about 25 years, and now all of a sudden here we are in the midst of this extraordinary materials kind of revolution. So yeah, that's my story. Today I run a business called Community Clothing, which makes in the UK. It's really more about creating jobs than being sustainable, but it's very sustainable as a byproduct of the way it operates.
Thank you, Patrick. Carmen.
Good morning from my side. My name is Carmen Dana. I worked in the industry in the last 25 years. My background is economics. I work for big brands coming from the markets at different leading roles. And now I'm in the innovative space since 3 years, and I speak for HeiQ AeoniQ today, which is an innovation company from Zurich.
And Luke Haverhals.
Hi, everybody. I'm Luke, the founder, CEO of NFW, who's got a sign over there. And what we do is we make plastic-free, petrochemical-free materials. So you can have shoes and clothes and car interiors and home interiors that are completely free of oil and toxic petrochemicals.
Thank you. And let me first give a little introduction on plastic and the question, does plastic make us sick, or do microfibers make us sick? As Plastic Soup Foundation, we started with that in 2014 with the Mermaids program, Life Plus, counting the microfibers that are released doing the laundry. And we found out in that consortium that there were 9 million fibers each laundry of 5 kilos. After that, in 2018, I addressed the Sustainable Apparel Coalition in Montreal, and I told them that if I could prove that fibers make us sick, I would sue them. I would bring them to justice. That made quite some impression, especially on a company like Inditex. In 2019, we organized the Plastic Health Summit in Amsterdam, where Barbro and her team were the first to tell us that nylon is a very bad messenger for our lungs, and it's really hurting our health. In 2022, we came out with the report, Do Clothes Make Us Sick? A review of over 200 articles by then, which were the proof that the inhalation of microfibers is very bad for our health. And I would like to know a little bit more of your studies, Barbro, because you know more than anybody else in this world about that issue.
Thank you. To start off, toxicity is all about dose. So we don't know how much we breathe in yet, but in the studies we did, in the amount that we add to our cells, nylon has been proven to be bad for your lungs. In particular, for the repair of your lungs and the growth of your lungs. And it wasn't the fibers themselves that were doing this, but the chemicals associated with the nylon. So nylon has all these chemicals inside that make the properties more desirable. And these leach out and cause the effects. So I'm actually less worried about particles, microplastic particles. I'm most worried about all the chemicals that are in plastic and that are leaching out and that have known and unknown effects.
At the same time, we know by now that all these little particles can clog in our veins, so in the heart veins, in the brains even. So scientists told me even that our veins are like heavy polluted rivers in Asia if you compare the amount of plastic that is in our blood, and much of that is fiber, synthetic fibers of garments.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if there are fibers in our blood, but there's definitely plastic in our blood. And there again, we come to dose. We cannot digest these particles and these fibers. So a little bit is not bad. We're exposed to all sorts of things and they don't kill us. But we cannot get rid of this stuff. So it stays in our body and it accumulates. And at some point in time, we will poison ourselves.
And that brings us to the true costs of plastic and the environment and the effects of that. So that brings me to you. That brings me to Patrick,
Right.
because you are talking about true costs of plastic.
Well, I mean, I think first of all, I just want to say that it feels like there ought to be more shock in the room at some of the things that are in your report and the things that you are saying. I mean, what we're saying is the stuff that we've decided to make our clothes out of is actually doing us potentially an increasing amount of harm as we go along. I mean, I think the really interesting thing was most of the textile systems, most of our clothes today are made out of materials that were developed in the 20th century really as a response to try and allow us to buy more stuff and for cheaper prices. You know, none of this was done in order to make clothes better. It was all designed to make clothes more abundant and less expensive. And I think we're all coming to a realization now that the systems that were created and industrialized in the 50s and 60s and 70s are really not fit for purpose. Our approach is quite straightforward. What we do at Community Clothing is we've sort of gone back in time as a first reaction, and we're waiting to see how the development of new materials comes along, because we are actively trying to remove all of the plastic materials from our products. We now make a range, for example, of completely plastic-free running clothing. So we had to develop, we went back to natural rubber and cotton, but it took our elastic supplier a number of years to go back and redevelop something that was completely ubiquitous 40 or 50 years ago, but because it's much cheaper to use elastane and polyester, all of those material systems had disappeared. Our approach is quite basic. We're going back to materials that we know work. So we make those products from 100%. We use cotton thread. The challenge with using cotton thread was that the factories didn't want to use it because it breaks more readily than synthetic thread. So you have to sew with a higher gauge, which is more expensive. I mean, firstly, the cotton thread is much more expensive, but you have to use then a higher gauge to get the strength, and then you have to sew a little bit more slowly. But all of these are things that we can do. It just adds to the cost. At the same time, as a business, we are looking at alternative material systems all of the time, and we are waiting for them to develop. I think the interesting thing that we've got now is almost quite a lot of the technology that's in this room is quite recent. You know, the other stuff we've been dealing with, some of it was invented in the latter part of the 19th century. It's had a long time to bed in, and it's really, really solidified. The other bit that has to happen is not just the technology needs to be developed, but the whole end-to-end supply chains need to be re-engineered, because you can't just drop one bit of new technology in to the midst of an old supply chain.
So it's also the yarn, for example, and it's to the product. So that's Carmen. If I may, you developed something that is an alternative for nylon and an alternative for polyester.
Yeah.
Please tell us a little bit more, because that could be revolutionary.
Yeah, it could be revolutionary. Thank
It
you,
is,
Maria.
maybe.
We are not there yet, I must say, but we have a solution that is able to replace polyester, nylon in the long run. It's I call it the next generation of cellulosic fibers. It's a filament yarn, and we all worked with viscose or lyocell or rayon or modal in the past. Was saying on the other side, when I worked for the industry, I was never the biggest fan of MMCF because it was very trapey when it came to application, and we really tried to give it a different hand feel and a different touch. And as said, I mean, there are three, let's say, points where we distinguish ourselves from the existing filaments on the market. First of all, we have a newer process. We work with a liquid. It's a closed loop process, so no toxic chemicals, does not harm the environment. And then we have different opportunities to use feedstocks. So we started with wood pulp. This is important to understand. To set up the process, we started with wood pulp, but we will opt for other cellulosic feedstock in the future. What means other feedstock? It can be textile waste, it can be agricultural waste, and it can be bacterial cellulose cultivated in the lab. So that's the novelty of our flexibility in the process. And then the fiber itself has a different fiber performance. So we have a better elongation and tenacity, and we have no fibrillation. So the fiber itself is more durable. I brought also some products with me, and due to the texturization, you can give it a different hand feel. You can mimic the polyester hand feel if you wish to, but you can also mimic a very soft and cozy body. And I must say MMCF, unfortunately, have a huge potential in the market. They are not seen yet. They have only 5.5% of the total fiber volumes right now on a global scale. And I think MMCF can do better in the market with the newer solutions. So I believe it is a material of the future, especially when it comes to scarcity of materials in general. MMCF can be a real alternative when it comes to performance clothing.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Carmen. Luke, you are an innovator. You won a huge award in 2022, and you brought it already. You brought some products with you because you are already scaling up.
That's right. So what we do is we make materials from nutrients. So we think all materials need to be made from nutrients for a couple of important reasons. Number one is toxicity. So when anytime anyone's compounding and making plastics, it got mentioned, and it's worth mentioning again. Plastics aren't just polymers; they're mixtures of materials. Lots of things that are, small molecules that are the same shape as estrogen, for example. So endocrine disrupting, therefore. So what we do is we use nutrients because, we've all evolved. All of our ancestors have been around these nutrients for a long, long time. Nature produces them at much larger scale than the petrochemical industry produces petrochemicals. And what we do is we compound with those nutrients and make families of materials. That way it's low cost, uses the same kind of equipment that normally mixes up petrochemicals and plastics. You can use the same kind of equipment to mix up compounds I have here. And then it allows natural recipes to do the one thing that plastic does that people really should like, which is you can mold and shape plastics into about anything. So that's why we use them to the tune of trillions of dollars per year, is because you can mold and shape them. So we make it possible to mold and shape these kinds of things. When I say nutrients, I'll also say it means we can use cellulose. So we don't grow anything new. You can see around the room today, there are people growing new materials, and that's fine. We use already at scale, large scale inputs, and means as any of the other growers of new materials produce more, we can use those as well. What we have is this platform to compound with nature's at cost, at scale, natural fibers and veggie oils and things that already exist at big scale that are byproducts of our food system.
Great initiatives. At the same time, 69% of our fashion is synthetic
That's
at
right.
this moment. In 2030, that will be 80%. We're talking about 50 billion kilos of oil a year. which is quite a lot. It's a huge, huge industry. What, for example, Barbro, if I look at, we have a scientist, we have an author, and a BBC presenter, and a designer, we have a manager, and we have an innovator, we are looking at the problem from all sides. What would you advise the world, or what would you say if you talk solutions?
I think the solution should be at multiple levels, right? It starts with ourselves, consume less. It starts with governments taking actions, requiring companies to pay for the pollution that they cause. And it starts with companies being more responsible and with lots of innovators coming up with good ideas.
And at the same time, if we have new materials, do you think it would be wise that they are, for example, tested in your lab to see if they have any toxicity in them?
Absolutely,
That they
yes.
don't just bring us solutions
Yes.
that you are not sure of?
Yes, because we think that nature is nice and not toxic, but of course we all know foxglove, for instance, a beautiful flower, contains one of the most deadly poisons. So all these new materials have to be tested as well and see if they stand the test.
And as something else, you are part of the Plastic Health Council, together with some other scientists, very outspoken scientists. And I heard a little bit of that already just now, but you are telling the world to take that responsibility as soon as possible.
Yes, start now. But I know it's difficult, right? If I hear, I think I should wear responsible stuff, but I go through my closet, and it's impossible to find something which doesn't contain plastic. I haven't adapted yet, so we all need to do better, and we need to start now.
Less, I heard you say less, and that's the title of his bestseller book. Just out for 1 month and already booming. Tell us more.
Well, I think part of the big issue we have to address is that there is just far too much clothing being produced. Too many people are making clothes, and they're making too much clothing. And most of what is being done in terms of material innovation is being done to facilitate the continuation of a really high level of clothing output. Our solution is very different. Encourage people to take a look at what they have and take a look at what they wear. I mean, the statistics on this are pretty damning. You know, we own 5 times as many clothes as we did when I was a kid. 70% or more of those clothes are made entirely out of synthetics, but almost all of our clothing contains some synthetics. Most of our clothes, even if they're 100% cotton, are sewn with polyester thread. We only wear, statistically, less than a third of the clothes we own. So why are we buying that other 65, 70% in the first place? Shouldn't we take a look at ourselves and try and understand what all of this stuff is there to do for us? Why are we buying so much stuff? Well, we're buying so much stuff because we're being fed it by the people that are looking for these solutions to facilitate their own continuation. Really, consumers have to take a look at themselves and say, look, we used to be perfectly happy. When I was born 50 years ago, fewer of our clothes were made of synthetics, and we had a lot less of it. But I didn't feel growing up that I didn't have enough clothing. The clothes I did have, I had more of a connection with. I understood where they came from. Many of them were made locally, which was really important to our society in terms of the work that it created and the continuation of solid communities. We've got to do all these things. We have to find innovative solutions to knock down the worst of the synthetics that are out in the system at the moment. That is absolutely clear, because we're not going to encourage everybody to start consuming less overnight. I mean, that ultimately is the solution. If we all consumed 30% as much clothing, we'd instantly make a huge amount of difference. If we just consumed the clothes we actually wore, it would make a huge difference. But we also have to find solutions that allow the worst end of the fashion industry to substitute the bad stuff with something that's going to that's better, because we're not going to change everybody's mind overnight.
No, I don't think so either.
No.
Carmen, you worked in the traditional fashion also. How long will it take until you can scale up your innovation, your innovational yarn? How
Well,
long will that take?
yeah, we are in the upscaling phase right now, so we plan to have the first production plant in Portugal ready by end of 2026, and a further upscale is planned for Morocco. Most likely it will be the right place for us, and it might be ready end of 2028. But I think that, I mean, all the innovators you see here are ready to upscale. I think we must overcome some systems that are valid for this industry since so long. So I think it's important that innovators are backed up from the industry to upscale, because let's say it's a heavy financing that is needed and a heavy fundraising that is needed, and banks or financial institutes will only believe in new systems if the industry backs up the novelties on the market. So I think it's not only about upscaling, it's also really trying to get the industry behind a new technology. Otherwise you build a new technology and it will never find its purpose in the market. So for me, it's really relevant that we overcome the existing systems, and this means really teaming up between innovators and the industry, and also having different mechanisms in the traditional textile industry, because still today all incentives are based on growing the business, having the right margin, generating EBITDA, and as long as the incentives are not coupled to sustainability or thinking in a different way, nothing will happen. And we all hope that then regulatory kicks in at some place, but you know, this is this is a slow process.
Yeah.
And
Well,
so-
maybe it's interesting to look at France, which just introduced
Yep.
the fast fashion import
I agree.
tax. So do you think that that makes sense?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
We
And what
need
do you
more of
think? Yeah.
that. Yeah, because I think if it's only based on the industry, and if it's not on from sea level in the industry, it's really hard to overcome the structures in the industry. I mean, I speak to so many potential partners, future partners, and I'm with the industry the whole day, because I'm really the link to the market in our company. And I see that the mechanisms work in the same way they have worked 25 years ago when I started. And as long this is the case, you cannot blame the single stuff for, you know, revolutionizing the system. So, or it's either owned by C-level in the companies, or it's regulatory that kicks in, or best is we have both options available in a short-term time.
I think that's a really important point. I think most of the biggest businesses in the fashion world exist to make money, and that is their single purpose. And the existing material systems are cheaper, I would have thought, than almost everything that is new and innovative, because it's already at scale, it's had 50 years of development behind it, it's been optimized. These companies are not going to change from using the bad stuff right the way across their organizations. You know, there are companies who have sustainable edits and capsule collections that are conscious collections. We know that these are a tiny percentage of what they do. That is the kind of halo that they're giving. But their overall business model is not going to change until people stop buying it,
Yep.
or until governments start taxing it in one way or the other. And I don't see the governments doing that anytime soon. But
Slow.
you know, most of the fashion industry and the sportswear industry will not move to new materials until they absolutely have to, because they're making too much money.
It's not completely true, because in Europe, they are looking at the unintentional released microfibers, for example, which are coming from fashion, and they are trying to
Oh, you mean government?
governments,
okay,
yes,
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
European Union is trying to take measurements against that.
In
So
this country, they're less
yeah, I know.
concerned,
I'm
less
coming
less
from I'm coming
prepared
from
to challenge
old
the
Europe,
businesses.
and I know
Yeah.
you are a very old country too, but you left us, so I'm here representing Europe.
We didn't
Very-
leave you. Some of us,
You left me. So back to Luke.
not spiritually.
Luke, what do you think? How can we have plastic-free clothes on a world scale.
Yeah,
What do we need to achieve this
yeah.
new world, which
Uh,
is so hard needed, I hear from all of you, and especially from Barbro.
Forgive me for saying that it's actually very simple. It's both
Please
the
make
most
it
simple
simple.
thing and the hardest thing at the same time, actually, what I'm going to say next, which is we need to recognize the true holistic cost of things. So do you know that around the world we subsidize the petrochemical industry to the tune of $7 trillion per year? Actually, petrochemicals aren't less expensive than naturals. It's not true. Our governments subsidize oil because of need to want to have low cost of energy. And that gives us all more money, by the way, to spend on what's in our closet. And so we have these perverse systems of actually subsidizing the thing that's toxic. So if we recognize the true cost, if we recognize that we're subsidizing oil, that plastics was actually an accident, by the way, it's all built on the infrastructure of this extractive thing we call the oil and fossil fuels industry, right? And if we recognize that, and then if we want to have consumption sort of practice change, then we're going to need something like EPR, extended producer responsibility, where anyone who's in the business to make money, that's going to make products, however they make products, we have to give everyone an even playing field. Because otherwise, what's going to happen is some people might make clothes the right way and do the hard work to get jukey sewing machines to use cotton thread at 3,000 RPMs instead of 5,000 RPMs. But most people won't, or when I say most people, statistically, most people seeking revenues in the fashion industry, let's say, they won't do that. They'll take the easy route. So were there to be extended producer responsibility that takes into account the full holistic true cost, where did the material come from? You know, NFW have this system, we say the ground rules. In order for a material to have a chance of ending well, even a chance, it has to first start well and stay clean. So that automatically disqualifies plastics at the start. They don't start well, they don't stay clean, and they don't therefore have a chance of ending well because the infrastructure, by the way, if you ever look at what a petrochemical refinery it is, it's large-scale distillation equipment. It has no ideas what to do with your old shoes or your old clothes or your furniture, and it never ever will. And it costs trillions of dollars. No one has trillions of dollars. Not even United States of America has trillions of dollars of free capital just throw at literally tens of trillions of new infrastructure. So the only way you churn over a system that's at the scale of, billions of people is to recognize those true costs, give a level playing field that resets how people think about the cost of consumption, and then get busy innovating and using those things that have the right unit economic solutions. There's a lot of nice ideas out here. Not all of them scale the same way. One of the unique things about NFW is we're built for scale.
But let's bring it back to health then again.
Yep.
Like Leo Trasande in the USA calculated that the costs of additives in plastics are causing 250 billion damage on medical costs.
And that's only a subset of known smoking gun sorts of issues.
Additives,
Yeah.
only the additives, which means that is good for 30 million nurses. And the USA only has 30 million nurses. And it's 1/3 of the medical costs of entire America. Which means that if we start calculating, going back to Barbro, if we start calculating the damage of plastic on our lungs or the additives in there, and we calculate that for the whole world, it might be that it costs more, body physical wise, than that the revenues of synthetic garments are. So that it is a balance that goes negatively, and in that way we can hold the industry accountable.
Maybe, but the problem here is timing, right? These are long-term effects, so you only see them after years of being exposed. The revenue is almost instantaneous.
Yeah.
So it's very difficult for companies and people to choose between long-term and short-term gains. And it's very difficult to prove that that particular effect is because you've been exposed to whatever chemicals.
But that's an old thing, because I remember that when we started beating the microbeat, L'Oreal told us that we could not prove that that particularly beat was theirs. And I said, I don't need to prove it. It doesn't belong in my toothpaste and not in the environment.
Yeah, but
So
if you
I
want
don't
to,
care.
if you want to have people responsible for something, then you need to know what they're responsible for. And in 30 years of exposures, it's impossible to tell if it's this additive from a plastic or this food that you've been eating for a very long time.
Except
And that's exactly what the tobacco industry
But I
has
was
been
going
doing.
to say, it's,
Using the hell out of consumers and medical experts, and thereby keeping the revenue going.
yeah. I mean, you can't exactly always prove either that chromium-6, which is very reactive and can oxidize your DNA and do all sorts of things, but you have statistical models, I guess. And tobacco industry is a pretty good example, I think, of, for a long time, people denied that what the true cost of tobacco would be. At this point, we have plenty of medical evidence, it seems, that says, scientists, I was listening the other day to a scientist who was pointing out they worked on drug delivery. And they were talking about how hard it is to deliver with nanotechnology the right drug that might attack, say, a cancer cell in your body and not attack the rest of your body, but target delivery drugs to your different parts of your body. And yet here what we have is our blood has this poorly targeted nano robot sort of technology in us with more than 16,000 sometimes different kinds of chemistries mixed into the petrochemical plastic soup that got put in you, and it's a nano species now that's in our blood, and what could go wrong, right? Like, so.
Well, that's where we are on the scary part, because how can you inform a lot of people about the dangers of synthetic clothes or the fiber loss of that, and at the same time hold them with you? Because I would be it scares the hell out of me if I hear all this reality papers from scientists. Really, it scares the hell out of me. And what can you do to alter that? But maybe it's time to ask people are there questions here?
Okay.
I'll take that one.
Okay, so yes, I was just going to say that I've been following the science recently about microfibers, and although synthetic clothing is more of what we're producing, like you said, Maria, 69% of the textiles today that we're producing, this isn't reflecting in the fibers that are being found in the environment, which is often more heavily cellulosic-based fibers. So I think my kind of approach to this issue and why I find it so interesting, this talk today, is that we're saying that new innovations need to be tested. You know, we need to scale down the amount of synthetics, but what about all the natural fibers out there? Should we be testing all fabrics? Because a lot of those carry chemicals. They're finished in ways that may have like plasticizing effects. It kind of alters their cellulosic structure, and they're not degrading in the environment. And to biodegrade in the environment, you need such specific conditions. And there's been denim jeans found at the bottom of shipwrecks over hundreds and hundreds of years. So yeah, I want to know, like, are we only looking at a fraction of the problem when we just narrow it down to kind of plastics? It'd be great to hear your thoughts.
So I'll start.
Yes, let you start, and then
All right.
Barbro, I think.
So
because it's
first of all, we should acknowledge any time people put petrochemicals on anything, whether it's petrochemicals on more petrochemicals or petrochemicals on naturals, then you've got a problem. So let's not coat cotton or any other cellulosic thing with PFAS to make it waterproof. That's bad. I don't think that there's any reasonable conclusion one can make, though, that cellulose in the environment is a problem. Here's why. There's more than 100 gigatons of cellulose that will grow through photosynthesis on planet Earth this year. 100 gigatons. Everybody on planet Earth could have 10 tons of cellulose because it's the primary thing that photosynthesis on the planet does, is produce cellulose. So fundamentally, cellulose is sugar. So it's glucose. It's the very sugar that you need to power your brain. For those people that maybe don't know the chemistry, if cellulose is a handshake basically between sugar molecules. So if the handshake is this way, we call it fiber, and your body doesn't digest it, and it breaks down slower in the environment. And it doesn't, like any fiber, it doesn't break down at all if it's in an anaerobic environment. So whether it's at the bottom of the ocean or in the bottom of a landfill, if there's no oxygen, there's no natural processes that break anything down, or very little, slower. If you do this handshake with glucose, we call it starch, and potatoes and all sorts of things. And we have an enzyme in our body that digests that. But the difference between starch and cellulose is literally just the kind of handshake that the sugar is doing. So that's a good example of, it's a material, it's ubiquitous. Unless we want to eliminate plants on Earth, you're not going to eliminate the ubiquitous nature of cellulosic fiber and lignocellulosic fiber and hemicellulosic fiber that's in the world. And what we need to do, though, is not coat any cellulosics or wool or silk or cashmere, for that matter, with petrochemicals, because what that'll do is put a plastic coating on an otherwise natural thing, which then prevents its breakdown, makes it toxic. So that's how I...
Does that answer your question?
Can I add something to that? Maybe a little bit more reassuring is that we have grown up to all these exposures, right? So we are used to some exposure, so we can deal with a lot of stuff. Having said that, again, it's all about dose. Any type of particle that you breathe in large quantities is going to be toxic. It can be cotton, it can be sand, it can be plastic. It will be toxic. The problem is that the plastics contain all these extra chemicals, and we cannot digest them. Sand, of course, we cannot digest as well, whereas the cellulose, etc., we have a chance of digesting. And just for you to be able to live at home and not worry about this too much, as long as you keep your healthy, your environment healthy with low exposure. So vacuum cleaning,
no synthetic
open
carpet.
the door, no synthetic carpet. Just keep your exposures down, then we should be fine. But when you work in a nylon flocking industry, then you might have a problem because there are lots of fibers around there. So it's all about risk, hazard, exposure.
Any other questions? In the back.
How do we remove fear in the face of climate change? Because I feel like a scared individual won't feel empowered to choose sustainable, or as if it even makes a difference.
Patrick?
Gosh, well, I mean, I think we ought to have a certain amount of fear, and I think we because this is a big threat. But we shouldn't feel unempowered, because we all have an opportunity to make very small changes that can have very, very big effects. I mean, if everybody on the interesting thing, I mean, the most interesting thing about fashion is that nobody needs fashion. You know, if fashion stopped entirely tomorrow, we'd all be fine. If nobody made another piece of clothing for the next 50 years, we'd all still be okay. We need food, we need energy, we need all sorts of other things to survive, but we don't need this stuff. So actually, if everybody collectively said, you know what, up yours, we're just going to stop buying it, it would go away. They'd all collapse and we'd start all over again and we'd be fine. So we can do it. So we're not powerless. We're just at this point where some people, we're on this big continuum. Some people don't know about this stuff. That's probably more people than we imagine because we're all living in a world of, we're all kind of the same sort of people in this room. A lot of people don't know about it. Quite a lot of people know about it but haven't really bothered to do anything about it because either they don't care or because they feel like you do. What's the point? Not you, sorry. But now you suggest some people might. My apologies. Or they just can't afford to make a change or for other reasons. And then there is so there's loads of people that don't know, loads of people that know they should be doing something, a smaller group that should know that they should be doing that haven't made a change. And then really I think quite a small group of people who know they should make a change and have made a change. And I think we're all moving in that direction. I cannot imagine a time in 10 years' time where we're all going, you know what we really need is more petrochem, more nasty toxic shit, like let's have more cheap clothes and bad stuff. We're not, like, we know that is bad and we are moving in that direction. I think it's like with cigarettes, like we know it's bad. We're not all going to start giving them to children again like we did in the 50s. Like we're moving in the right direction. So be hopeful. People are making big changes and the number of people making those changes is growing. I think we are at the start of a tip, but we're not there yet. But
I guess we need people to be aware. We need people to spread the message, right? Because taking the analogy of the cigarette industry, we're not giving them to kids anymore, but we're giving them vapes these days. And we're letting the industry get away with that. So we need to be a little bit more alert and we need to talk to people and make people aware.
And with that, let's close this panel. And thank you very much for all your contributions. Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
The problem of microfibers is becoming enormously alarming. What started as a marine environmental contamination issue has become a full-scale environmental and human health issue as well. While production of synthetic fibers continues to grow at an alarming rate, with nearly 75% of clothing projected to be made from them by 2030.
With multiplexed laser surface enhancement, MLSE, by MTIX, we can prevent significant microfiber shedding, all without the use of water or chemicals. As a winner of the Microfiber Mitigation Challenge 2022, we have established a process, commercially available and industrial scale, that achieves microfiber mitigation, third-party tested and verified. However, we can't do this without you. Even the most effective revolutionary technology requires aggressive and dedicated collaboration from brands and textile mills. Microfiber pollution is on the rise. In the meantime, talking about it and signing pledges is not enough. You can be the game changers. Together we can implement radical, viable, exciting solutions today.
Hello, I'm Phil Mansour, CEO of MTX. We want to share this solution that you just saw with it as quickly as possible with the entire industry. Today we're announcing a special opportunity for the exhibitors, the attendees, and the sponsors of Future Fabrics Expo. We will provide up to 100,000 meters of free microfiber mitigation treatment at no cost to businesses large and small. Come find us today and we'll explain the details. Together we can have immediate impact on the environment.